Hi, everyone. This is Sebastian Traeger. I'm the managing director of reliability.com, and welcome back to another Reliability 4.0 episode. As always, we're on a mission to help make the world a more reliable place. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Yuri Grinshteyn of Google. He's going to talk a little about his role and his work. Yuri, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, it seems odd for me to ask you to tell us a little bit about your company, but I know that you serve as the site reliability engineer manager there at Google. But because Google is such a large company, why don't you tell us about specifically the area within Google that you're working, and then tell us a little bit more about your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are right. Google, of course, is both well known, but also enormous. So I work within Google Cloud, specifically within cloud site reliability engineering, or cloud SRE. My team is called Customer Reliability Engineering. So we're essentially the kind of the outermost edge of the cloud SRE organization. And we work both directly with our largest, most complicated, and most demanding customers to ensure that they have a good experience with reliability on our platform. And we also do a lot of work to sort of essentially advocate on the behalf of our customers to the rest of the SRE, the rest of the cloud SRE organization, to make sure that we're delivering the things that our customers need. And essentially, we're also the part of cloud SRE that does a lot of work around telemetry to ensure that we understand the reliability of our customers, that we can detect issues that impact our customers' reliability, and then when we do detect them, that we're able to respond appropriately.
Great. Well, we're going to drill down a little bit more into that specifically and what you're doing for customers. But just before we dive into that, I always like asking folks, how did you get into this field in the first place? What's kind of your origin story as to how you ended up doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back some time, so I'll start at the beginning. Essentially, my first job in tech, both during and then after college, was around tech support. This was a small company in Boston, and at the time they were primarily focused on software test automation. And then while I was there, I believe we acquired essentially a monitoring product. That was kind of my first experience with measuring reliability in production, alerting, and things like that. And I spent a lot of my time doing support for that product, working with some of our biggest customers of that product. And then I kind of worked around monitoring and alerting essentially through my entire career. I worked at CompuWare, I worked at Oracle. And then when I came to Google, I was still doing essentially pre-sales. This is more of a generalist role, but then I started to kind of focus a little bit around our monitoring, diagnostics, logging, tracing capabilities. I moved into a specialist role, and then I actually saw that there was an opening within this team. This was, well over 4 years ago now. So I thought it was a good opportunity to sort of allow me to continue to focus on the areas around monitoring diagnostics, but actually improve my skills around reliability and kind of understand the space a bit more. Move it into an engineering role, but also still be very connected to customers and kind of maintain that customer focus and kind of retain some of those strengths that I see in myself. So that's how I ended up on the team. And then a couple of years in, there was an opportunity to kind of try out management again. I had managed prior in my career elsewhere, and I greatly enjoyed it. I thought I was okay at it. And there was an opportunity to take a shot at it here, and then that was a couple of years ago, and I've been a manager on this team for the last about 2 years now.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm gonna find out a little bit more about that in a minute. But even before we continue diving in, what's something you like to do outside of work? Just something on the personal side of your life that help people get to know you a little bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've got my son's going to be turning 9 this summer, so as you can imagine, he takes up quite a bit of time, and obviously,
right,
he's always fun to hang out with. And then I've been sort of a lifelong video game player. I've played.
Nice.
I started when my family first moved to the United States in the early 90s. One of our neighbors gave us the original Nintendo. So I spent a bunch of time playing that, and then I had a Super Nintendo when I was in high school, and I've played various games ever since. I have a Switch and a Steam Deck now, and those are probably my biggest hobbies.
And what's your go-to right now? What's like the game you're most into?
So right now I'm replaying the Mass Effect trilogy. I'm kind of halfway through Mass Effect 2. When I finish that, I know that Hades 2 is in early access, so I'll probably be playing that next.
Great. I love it. I love that you've already got the next one lined up. That's pretty fun. So diving back into work, I like that it's really helpful that you're kind of straddling clients or customers, and of course everything happening at Google. That's a neat place to be in. What are some of the KPIs you focus on? What's important to your clients, and how do you measure whether or not you're being effective in your team is being effective in your role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's actually two parts to that. The first one is kind of what do our customers care about, and how do we measure their success? And then sort of second is, how do we measure the success of the team? Because those aren't necessarily the same thing. I think from our customers' perspective, one thing that we've really worked hard at is to understand, how can we translate the signals that we have from the infrastructure side into the customer impact, and what does it mean to the customer? So we have some customers that we work with that sort of have what we would call like a clean top line signal, which means it's the thing that we can look at to determine whether their business service, their application, their end users are happy or not.
Mm-hmm.
But for most of them, we don't actually have a good way to measure that, or at least a clean way of measuring that. And so in those cases, we kind of fall back on the infrastructure signals, right? The health of the cloud products they're using in the regions they're using them, specifically within this, the projects that they're using them and things like that.
Okay.
So that's how we try to kind of understand the reliability of our customers. And then, the other part is like, well, how do we measure our team's ability to improve our customers? Because it's not always about necessarily even improving customer reliability, right? We have any number of customers that may be satisfied with their current reliability, but would like to, for example, reduce the amount of toil or the amount of effort that it takes to achieve those levels of reliability. So they'd like to improve efficiency. We work with customers that are more interested in efficiency, right? Again, they want to preserve their existing levels of reliability, but they want to be more efficient about how they use cloud resources, things like that. And so, my team does a lot of work in sort of different areas and different directions.
Okay.
And so we essentially run like a biannual planning cycle where we kind of plan out our deliverables, our projects, and then we look at how well we do against our objectives and how well we deliver on our KRs. So that's kind of how we go about managing the team and managing kind of understanding how successful we are. Again, making sure that our customers are happy, but at the same time, making sure that we're progressing on our engineering deliverables. And as you can imagine, sometimes those can come in conflict, right? That could be a customer situation where a customer needs something done quickly, and it wasn't something we had on our roadmap. It wasn't something that we had planned for or prioritized, and there can often be, as you could well guess, tension or conflict between those two. And so a lot of what we do as a leadership team is try to resolve those as well.
That's good. So do you have, I'm curious, because we've thought about this a lot as a company, do you have any kind of health scorecard for your clients, meaning trying to predict which of those are very happy and which ones, happy being a function of not just emotionally how you're feeling, but getting the value they're paying for, and which ones might not be? And is that something you try to work within and try to obviously drive them towards greater green dots as opposed to red?
Yeah, I think we do this from a number of different angles. Some of that is done by the other customer-facing teams, whether that's sales, professional services, technical account management, support, right? There's all kinds of like customer happiness and customer health scorecards that they use. Our team doesn't as much depend on those. We try to do things just more from a reliability standpoint, like how many issues has this customer had? How many times has the platform been broken in a way that's impacted them? How many of those have we been able to detect versus the customer having to report to us? Those kinds of things.
Great, that makes sense. It's good. It's helpful. So in terms of top challenges or priorities that you're facing, what are some of those right now that you would say that you're able to share are some of the big priorities that you're seeing that need to be addressed, given where we are right now with cloud infrastructure and the maturity of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm in a position, sort of a fortunate position, to be able to say that the stuff that my team is working on, right, understanding customer reliability, identifying issues, with the reliability of specific customers and be able to respond to those issues appropriately are kind of the priority. Certainly for my team, I think very much so for Cloud SRE at Google, and maybe even for the company beyond that. I think one of the things that we've sort of seen in the last couple of years is, if you've read the SRE books that Google has published, you've heard about SLOs, you've heard about us, measuring service health essentially by aggregating whether it's event data or good minute data or other things, essentially at the service level or perhaps even maybe at the region level to say like how are things going. And what we've I think learned in the last couple of years is that we can have any number of things go wrong where a particular customer might be impacted in a particular way where it's not going to show up in the aggregate SLO or the per region SLO. And if you're a big customer who's like giving us a lot of money, they're pretty unhappy about those circumstances, because they're the ones that are having to report the problem to us and say, hey, like this thing is not working. Like, why am I the one that has to tell you that? Why don't you already know about that? And that's, as you can imagine, that results in some amount of customer frustration. And so what my team is really driving is this shift from sort of a service-centric approach to reliability to a customer-centric approach, to understanding who are the top customers and how do they use our platform and what kind of issues are they having that are impacting them in specific ways. And that's difficult, right? That's a real shift for how we've operated Google more broadly, but certainly cloud more recently, to move from a sort of a service-centric approach to a customer-centric approach. And I think that's really where my team is in many ways at the tip of that spear.
Good. So I'm curious how, of course, we're interested in this as a company because this is what we do. I'm curious, how do you use root cause analysis in your work? How does that play itself out? What role does it have? How often are you using that as a problem-solving technique?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me maybe give you sort of the more general, like Google SRE answer, which is we certainly do root cause analysis, but it's not the first thing we jump to when we detect a problem, right? We very much focus on a triage and mitigate approach, right? So triage, like how bad is the problem, who's impacted, that sort of thing, and then mitigate, which is what is the fastest thing I can do to get the service back to a good state? That might be rolling back the last code change if I think it's a bad binary rollout, rolling back a config change, if I think it's a geographically related issue, like whatever, fiber cut in the data center, route traffic around that particular data center to other places. If it's a bad cluster, right, direct traffic to other clusters, like those kinds of things, where I'm really not trying to understand the root cause. I'm just trying to understand, like, what is the thing I can do quickly, safely, that'll restore user experience, and then I'll figure out what the root cause might be after the fact. And then we do root cause analysis really kind of after the incident has been mitigated, which is we try to understand, if it was a bad config change, how was it bad? In what ways? Why did a bad config change make its way to production? Did we not have enough tests? Did we not have enough documentation? Were our rollouts not safe enough? Did they need to be more gated or more slow, or whatever the case may be? So those are the kinds of things that we kind of do in the incident learning phase. We write what some people call postmortems, some people call it retrospectives. But we take those very seriously. We try to learn about the incident in that phase, and that's where really I would say what you might call root cause analysis is done, is the post-incident phase. Now, more specifically to my team, because we care about the reliability of specific customers, we do a little bit more when there's, like, let's say we've detected an incident that we think is impacting a customer, or a customer has reported an incident to us that they said there's impact. We try to kind of do some of the initial triage, but because my team doesn't actually own the reliability of any of the services that the product depends on, that the customer depends on, rather, we do a lot of sort of communication, escalation, things like that. Maybe in some rare cases, we'll even step up as an incident commander, although that's pretty rare. But it's sort of our job to kind of figure out who might be the team, the person. Right. Probably not the right word. The team, right? The on-call rotation. That we need to get involved if we really think there's like a production issue that folks are not already responding to. And then after the fact, right, once things again have been mitigated, once things have calmed down, we certainly participate in the postmortem. We kind of offer our the customer-centric perspective, impact data, and things like that. And then the third place where my team does a lot of work is around triage, which is like when the alert fires, how much automation can we do to kind of figure out what it might be? Right. The very simple example is we detect network packet loss that's impacting a particular customer. Can we quickly tie that to, hey, there's a router that's undergoing maintenance somewhere, like we should direct traffic somewhere else? Those kinds of things. Or like I said, maybe there's a partial fiber cut in some data center or something like that. So that kind of automation where we can just put that information in front of the on-caller right when the alert fires, that's another area where my team is investing quite a bit.
Great. That's helpful. That's really, really good. Well, I want to, before obviously we let you go, I'd love to hear areas where you are seeing innovation or most excited about innovation. Obviously, you're at a company that does a lot of innovating. Where are you seeing it benefit your team specifically in providing help, service to customers in your role?
Yeah, I actually would go back to the last thing I just said, which is we're doing a lot of work to put more useful and more actionable information directly in front of the on-caller. I think, historically it's been about playbooks, right? How good of a playbook can we write? Which is when the alert fires, it links to a playbook, the on-caller follows the playbook to, to kind of figure out what to do the triage and mitigation, essentially. And now we're trying to automate that, or at least as much of it as possible, which is we're trying to automate the triage at least, which is the first step, which is, can we look at the data that we have available to us and figure out, what is the scope of the incident? Are other customers impacted at the same time? Are other products impacted at the same time? Are we having some kind of a global issue? Thankfully, those being pretty rare. Or is it something, much more localized and much more specific? Just make it much easier for the on-caller to figure that out so that, they can get to something actionable much faster. So that's just the stuff that I'm directly involved with.
Yeah, that's great.
Is really focusing on, obviously, within Cloud SRE, there's a million things going on, but this is kind of where my team is investing a lot of effort in.
And so on that, are you having them sort of write down what the incident is, or I guess that comes to you, and then does it automatically basically fill out like here's 4 things it could be, or is it actually solving that problem automatically?
We haven't quite gotten to the solving step yet. I think that's hopefully something we'll focus on next is, automatic mitigation. As you can imagine, there's going to be some safety concerns there, and we want to make sure that like we trust the robots before we let them loose in the production infrastructure. But so it's very much how much of the triage can we automate? How much information can we give the on-caller to basically make that decision of like what is wrong and what do I do about it as easy as possible.
And do you see that as, because again, I think this is kind of where things are headed. Do you see the goal is to speed up how fast they come to the issue, or is it how accurate a prediction is that person getting? I mean, they're both kind of accomplishing the same thing, but it is a little bit different problem.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the success metric we're using is very much speed rather than accuracy, at least in this initial pass. I think historically, we've done fairly well with accuracy just because, we have good systems, we have good tools, we have good people, we have good training. And so I think where accuracy really manifests is in speed, quite honestly, right? Because if you get it wrong the first time, like you try something, it doesn't work, you're just like sort of extending that timeline, right? So if we just look at that timeline and say, how do we reduce the time to triage, the time to mitigate, and the time to communicate, that's what we're holding as our success metrics.
That's good. That's great. Well, that's a really, again, I think we could talk a lot more about this because I think it is where things are headed, but we really appreciate this just insightful conversation. Again, today we've had Yuri Grinshteyn with us. He is an SRE manager at Google. He has just been a wealth of knowledge. If you are working in a reliability engineering role, whether it's in technology, whether it's working with customers, whether it's in a plant, I highly recommend you check this out because I think the ideas that he is proposing, or even not just ideas, they're actually implementing them, are, in kind of cloud world, it's a little easier to get that data faster. But I think this is coming to plants of all types soon, where there's more and more data and the ability to triage quickly. And I like how you said triage, mitigate, and then, sort of solve problems is only going to get faster and faster. So Yuri, thank you so much for being a part of this today. We appreciate it. And to all listeners out there and really anybody, our goal, our job is to help engineers take more practical steps in using technology to solve problems, in doing root cause analysis better and applying the tools that you've learned. If you're out there and you're looking for training or resources and materials, check out reliability.com. We'd love to help you dig deeper into reliability and RCAs, and specifically with some of our training or our in-house software, Easy RCA. And again, we hope you've benefited from this, as our mission is to help make the world a more reliable place. We hope you'll join us on that journey, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you so much.